Hello, this is Mr. Mortley, and we are going to be looking at the relationship between magnitude versus frequency in terms of natural hazards and disasters. This again is from the Unit 1 of the World at Risk AS EDEXCEL unit, and is a key concept which the exam board are likely to question you on or would want you to refer to. So this is going to be a video showing the basic relationships between magnitude and frequency. Now, before we start, we need to understand what we mean by magnitude and what we mean by frequency. So, let's go and look at the key terms of what these words actually mean. This is ripped straight from the Unit 1 book, happened to find it online. So, what we need to look at is, first off, the frequency. Now, basically, the frequency, if something's more frequent, it happens more often. If something's less frequent, it happens less often. So all you need to know is the frequency is how often a event occurs. So, for example, in this instance, it's given a flood of a 1 metre height may occur on average every year on a particular river, while a 2 metre flood may occur about every 10 years. The frequency is called the recurrence interval. So basically, the time intervals between each event is the frequency. Now, if we look at magnitude, the size of the event, i.e. how big the event was. So the force of a gale on the Beaufort scale, or the size of an earthquake on the Richter scale. So as we know, a low magnitude event would be 1 on the Richter scale, and a large magnitude event would be 9 on the Richter scale, and every other value in between would signify the magnitude of that event. Obviously, we can look at other disasters, i.e. tornadoes on the Fujita scale, and we could look at hurricanes, how they classify them 1 to 5 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. So, now we're going to look at a graph which will illustrate the difference between frequency and magnitude. Now, what we expect from the difference between frequency and magnitude is that high frequent events will tend to be low magnitude. So we could start our point up here, and we also expect high magnitude events to be of a low frequency, which would be down here. And the chart follows in between those 2 points. So we have a frequency magnitude table here. Now, there are 2 main things you need to understand whilst looking at this chart. First off, we're going to look at high frequency events. So this is the section up here. Now, types of events up here will tend to either be annual or seasonal. So, for example, we may have annual monsoonal floods, which are high in frequency but tend to be of a lower magnitude. Another example would be United Kingdom winter river floods. Is another example where we may see certain floods happen in the UK quite frequently in winter, but because of their seasonal timings, the magnitude is relatively low. Now, this means that people are expecting high frequent events, therefore should be able to mitigate or manage against them. So the people up here will tend to be less affected by such frequent events. Now, if we compare that to a higher magnitude event, which would be down here, will have a lower frequency. This is where we see catastrophic events or mega disasters, which is the key word the EDEXCEL like to hear. So this is where we see a very high magnitudal event which tends to happen on a lower frequency. So, for example, we may see a tsunami that would hit 9 on the Richter scale, and one that springs to mind is the 2004 South Asian tsunami. This in itself was a high magnitude event, and it was very, very low in frequency. The only other one that could match that is the 2011 Japanese tsunami. Those 2 alone are high magnitudal events with a low frequency. So from this, we can understand that the people affected from a high magnitudal event is much more than it would be at the other end of the scale, where we have a high frequency with a lower magnitude. So as you can imagine, managing against a high magnitude event with low frequency may not be cost effective compared to managing against a high frequent event. Now finally we're going to look at what happens in these stages here. Now we seem to have a mid-frequency and a mid-magnitude, so examples of this would be class 3 hurricanes or 6 on the Richter scale for earthquakes. These events here are generally devastating, but are the ones that in very high risk areas people and governments will manage against. So other examples in this area here would be seasonal hurricanes, but also seasonal tornadoes in Tornado Alley would also be around this area here. So just to recap, high frequency events up here tend to have a low magnitude and do not tend to affect many people in those areas, whereas high magnitude events with a lower frequency tend to have more devastating effects on certain populations and countries, which are also defined as possible mega disasters. My suggested activity for looking at the differences between magnitude and frequency is to, along the scale, pick out 6 areas along this scale, and see if you can find any case studies which relate to high frequency, low magnitude, or high magnitude and low frequency. And what I would suggest is that you put the case studies where you think along the scale they fit. It would be also wise to take a note at the effects on both environmental, social and economic, and see how they would vary along that scale. That suggested activity will allow you to see the differences and be able to evaluate the relationships between both frequency and magnitude. Thank you very much. I've been Mr. Mortley, and I hope you are more wiser than before.